Jewish kingdom is, again, this manifestation, the expression, the worldly receptacle that expresses something much higher, divine content. So we saw that, a few sources for that. The question is, though, maybe we'll see, before we go on to something else, we can share these sources. The Rambam, I want to pass this out, is in a few places. The Rambam writes, the laws of kings and their wars. There's a section of the laws of the Rambam. The laws of kings and their wars, chapter 11. The Rambam writes, where it's underlined, you have this, HaMelech HaMashiach Atid Lamod V'Lachzir Malchut David Liyoshna V'Memshela Rishona. The first thing that the kingdom, the Mashiach, does in the future, to returning the kingdom of David to its original status. L'Memshela Rishona, to return to Jewish sovereignty, the Jewish kingdom. Rambam goes on and says that that's not, he doesn't have to do miracles. In law number 3 here, Al Yaled, don't think that the Mashiach has to do miracles and wonders and make new things or resurrect the dead, but rather it's not so. For you see that Rabbi Kiva, the great wise scholar Rabbi Kiva, he thought he was the Nosei Kelav, he was the arms bearer of Bar Kochva, and he said that he was the Mashiach. He had an aspect of the Mashiach. What did Bar Kochva do? Return Jewish sovereignty. For a few years, this Bar Kochva, the revolution, he returned Jewish sovereignty. And Rabbi Kiva says, oh, that's a glimpse of, that's a manifestation of the Mashiach, the future return. After the temple was destroyed here, after many years, the returning of Jewish sovereignty. And that's what the Rambam says here, that he thought he was the Mashiach until he was killed because of the sins. But until then, how did he think he was the Mashiach? He didn't do any miracles. But rather, the Mashiach doesn't have to do miracles. The very return of Jewish sovereignty manifests this element of the Messianic era, as we'll see. So if there's no miracles, then how does he return? But rather, as we've learned before, there's a natural process. Jews come back. Again, in Bar Kochva's time or in our time, the Jewish kingdom, sovereignty, there's wars, there's difficulties, but nevertheless, the Jewish sovereignty returns without any supernatural miracles. It's all a miracle. The fact that we've had the Jews after 2,000 years can return to be independent again. The Balfour Declaration, San Remo, and then the UN ratifying it, that the world will agree. But nevertheless, it took place through natural means. That's how the Messianic era comes about, without doing any supernatural miracles. There are those that are waiting for the Mashiach to come from heaven, from spiritual, some I don't know, from above, and all of a sudden the Mikdash falls into place, and we see that's the Mashiach. Here the Rambam says, don't think it'll be that way. It's without miracles. But the difference is the kingdom, as more explicit in the laws of Tshuva. The laws of Tshuva, the second source you have, the Rambam in chapter 8, he defines the middle, right in the middle there. Limot Mashiach, waiting for the days of the Mashiach. When is that? How do we know when the Mashiach is? What do you mean the days of the Mashiach? The Gemara says in Sanhedrin and other places, there's 6,000 years the world exists as we know it. 2,000 years of chaos, of the world coming into order. 2,000 years of Torah, of the order of Torah, and now organizing all the instruments being created, so to speak, in cacophony, each one tuning up and working itself. 2,000 years of Torah that organizes it in a proper way, and then 2,000 years of Mashiach. In the year 2000, what happened in the year 2000? You know when Avraham Avinu was born when? 1948. And it says when he was 52, he started doing the Giyur and started bringing down. And there was a certain level of the year 2000 was Avraham Avinu now starts to organize, like we have the instruments, creation, 2,000 years of this chaotic reordering of the world, this big creation of the world, so to speak, without a conductor. And then Avraham Avinu, 2,000 years, starts conducting the world to the order of Torah. In the year 4000 is when it says the time of the Mashiach can begin. So the Gemara goes on, and why didn't we have the Mashiach then? He says that later, because of our sins, we have to be worthy and a certain aspect of readiness to let that era come about. But it begins, when is the first possibility? In the year 4000. And we talked about that many months ago in the beginning of the series here, how to bring it quicker, to bring in the year 4000 would have to be worthy and property behavior, etc. The later it comes, the less we have to be worthy, but then it comes in a more difficult fashion. Then it comes with like labor pains and more difficult, but then it comes. Like we said in Sanhedrin, if you're worthy, it comes this way. If you're not worthy, it comes that way. That if you're worthy, then you can open up, and it could have come much longer, much previously, from the year 4000 on. The later it comes, then it'll still come. There's a time, we mentioned, the Gemara says, in its time it'll come. There's a deadline date that God set that the world can't pass without having been coming back to its beginning of its perfection for which it was created for. The ideal state of what God has in mind for the world. We still haven't reached it. But that, it can come, he says, if you're not worthy, then it comes in a different fashion. Then it comes like blood, sweat, and tears, more difficult. But nevertheless, the year 4000 is this Messianic era. But when is the Messianic? How do you know the delineation of when that period now has actually begun? So the Rambam, based on the Gemara in Brachot, he says, what is the Yemot HaMashiach? Bizman shetashuv hamemshala lYisrael. The time when the kingdom, when Jewish sovereignty will return. That's the definition of the Messianic era. Not miracles, not the Beit HaMikdash, not the temple, not everything is holy and religious. The Jewish sovereignty constitutes a delineation of a new era. Again, what we had in 1948 here, in the common era, not the Jewish years, 1948 was Avram was born, but in the common era, what they call the calendar, in 5708, in the Jewish calendar, was the state of Israel, the return of Jewish sovereignty. It's not just a political thing now, whatever. That has spiritual significance, as we've learned and discussed. The fact of sovereignty. And another place, the Rambam in Laws of Tshuva, next chapter, in chapter 9, you see, Aval Yemot HaMashiach Hu Olam Hazeh. There's another world to come. There's another level of creation, of perfection. But the days of the Mashiach is in this world. Olam Kamin Hago Olech. The world continues in its fashion, in the laws of nature that we know of today. No, so why is it the end of Mashiach then? If the world is the same, everything is the same. There's no new phenomenon, new miraculous. So if the world goes out its way, so what causes it to be the days of Mashiach? Ela shamalchut tachzor lYisrael. When the kingdom returns to Israel. The return of Jewish sovereignty, again, I'm emphasizing again, based on the Gemara. The Gemara says there's nothing between this world and the Yemot HaMashiach, ela shibud malchuyot, the getting rid of the sovereignty, the subjugation to other nations. Jewish freedom, Jewish independence. Again, it's not a political thing. That is what enables, you can't be, we said in chapter, page 14 in Megillah, the tractate Megillah, that we don't say Hallel on Purim. The Gemara says because we were still servants to Achashverosh. So how can you say Hallel? Hallel is the first thing you open up. Hallelu Avdei Hashem. We praise you, the servants of God. How can you say the servants of God when you're still the servants of Achashverosh? You're still subordinate to another king above you. Not that you believe in him; he's not your God, but you're subordinate. You're under the rule of foreign rule. And as if the Gemara says you can't say therefore the servants of God. We mentioned that, right, when we talked about the sources of he that lives in Chutzlaretz, if he worships idols. There's another force above him, between God. Not that he wants to. That's the reality. Outside of Israel, or sovereignty, lack of sovereignty in Eretz Israel, that's a form of not direct worship to God. There's someone above you that you're paying taxes to, his laws, his constitution, So the days of the Mashiach, the rabbis say in the Brachot there, and also the Rambam brings it down to the law, that when the kingdom returns to Israel, he brings down the Gemara. Our rabbis already told us, Ein bein olam hazeh. There's nothing between this world and the days of the Mashiach. What's the demarcation? What delineates makes this new era? Ella, the Gemara says, shibud malchiyot, right? The getting rid of the shibud, the subordination to other nations. We have another source I want to do later, the Ramban, that you see on the left. But first I want to ask you, or to bring up the famous important question of how can this, you said in 1948 we returned to Jewish kingdom. This is the Messianic era. This has spiritual significance to this date, to this phenomenon of a secular state. The people that set it up, the people that run it, whatever, are not in the name of God, not saying we are making the nation of the kingdom of God is being revealed through us. So how to relate to this? Is it indeed just another secular like every other state, every other independence? Or is there an objective value to Jewish independence, disregarding, in other words, not dependent on the religious observance of that kingdom? That's the very receptacle. So we discussed that before. There's a few sources we saw. I'll read you one here of whatever theological interpretation of current history, we have witnessed the rebirth of Malchut Yisrael, the Jewish sovereignty, Jewish kingdom. This implies a regime whose leaders are Jews. The very fact that they're Jewish control, but they're not aware of this, they don't believe in God, we mentioned last time, right? If a child grows up and I don't have a neshama, I don't know what you're talking about, neshama, I have a Jewish soul. I don't know what neshamot are, I don't believe in neshamot, I don't want a neshama. It doesn't depend on him. That's an objective reality. When the child is born to a Jewish woman, he has a Jewish soul. It's a package deal. He can say all day, there's no God, I don't believe in God, So too, the Jewish people coming back to Israel, it's Jewish sovereignty. They can say all day, we don't want to be the kingdom of God, we don't believe in God, we don't want God, we're just another state, another flag at the UN. It's an objective reality. When Jewish regime whose leaders are Jews, that implies a Jewish state. Whereas alien government denotes galut. Malchut Yisrael spells its abrogation, whatever the religious character of its leaders. It's not dependent on what they think. If they say all day there's no God, to take a vote, God forbid, there's no God. So there's no God. God is working to bring the Jews back to the land of Israel, to fulfill all these prophecies. And you could say all day, unfortunately, you can mistakenly say there's no God. It's all natural. But it doesn't change the fact. This is God working and not dependent on your subjective understanding or misunderstanding. So too the state of Israel, the land of Israel, the kingdom of Israel, is defined by the Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel. Another rabbi, the Rav Tzit Eliezer, one of the great poskim, recent generation, he passed away a few years ago, Rav Eliezer Waldenberg. He has over 20 volumes of responsive literature. Today, the cabinet and the Knesset, who represent all the residents of Israel, have the validity of a melech, Navi or Shafet. There's laws of what constitutes a king, a full-blown king in the Jewish law, whatever. But there's certain laws, he said, the state of Israel has this validity of a kingdom, and we'll see the ramifications of that, regardless of religious shortcomings. Doesn't depend on what they think. Like I said, you don't believe in God, so there's no God. You don't believe having a Shema. It's a reality. God created this vehicle. Jewish sovereignty, that's the vehicle through which this kingdom, this energy, this light comes to the world. The more they understand it, the more they live up to it. Definitely, the more Torah, the way it's supposed to be, what will be. But as we saw in Yechezkel 36, the first stage of coming back to the land, is in spite of your sins, in spite of the fact that you're not worthy. I'm doing it for my name's sake. My kingdom has to come back to the world. That will be. So we said if you're worthy and you're proper, then it opens up. And then it could have been 100, the year 4000. It could have been a long time ago. But if you're not worthy, what? The Gemara says it won't be? No. Then it'll come in a different fashion. But God's kingdom has to be. That goal of creation is, all of creation was created just to reach this point of perfection, to manifest the ideal of God in the world. You can't hold that up. You can't prevent that. You can hold it up temporarily and make it come about difficult. Like I said, blood, sweat, and tears to bring it about. But it will be. Yechezkel 36 says it explicitly, right? That God tells the prophet, I'm going to bring you back to the land in spite of the fact that you're not worthy. Lo lemanchem ani oseh beit Yisrael. Not for your sakes do I do this. So wait a minute, if we're not worthy, why is it coming? Because it says, Leman Shemi, for my name's sake. We learned a lot, right? Leman Shemecha, all the prayers that we say, Leman Shemecha, for your name's sake. We're not deserving, we're not worthy, So why? Because there's something greater than our worthiness. There's something that transcends that. The divine ideal for creation is not up to man to destroy it, to prevent it. We can hold it up, and we can affect how it comes, but not if it comes. That goal, all of history is coming to bring it about. It comes about sometimes directly, sometimes roundabout through difficult and different detours. But the ideal of creation will be, all of creation was just created to reach that point, to bring the facilitation, to bring about that full expression of God's ideal. So the validity of the kingdom is regardless of religious shortcomings, Rav Waldenberg writes in volume 7. Rav Yaakov Emden, Zatzal, wrote that there was validity of kibush Rabbi, the validity of a kingdom, like there's a king that can capture things, and it can be a private capturing. It doesn't have the halachic significance of a Jewish conqueror, of the Jewish kingdom conquering, but of the He says there was validity of the kibush Rabbim to that which Yerovam ben Yoash captured, even though he was a Rasha, even though he was evil. In Malachim 2, chapter 14, talks about the king Yerovam ben Yoash captured certain parts, and that's considered the kibush Rabbim, of the capturing of Jewish kingdom. That he was not a righteous, holy person, king. But nevertheless, that was the kingdom of Israel at the time, and that validity of kingdom applied to, and he goes to war, and different laws and ramifications of having a Jewish kingdom. But the spiritual significance is very great of understanding that now we've entered the era that now God's name has a new vehicle, a higher level of, we had a Geiger counter, we mentioned a new level of energy in the world. And then it's only the beginning of the process. As we saw in Yechezkel 36 and 37, the dry bones, the stages, first the physical building, the body comes back, the Jewish kingdom, the framework, and then more and more the spiritual content, the ideal, the neshama, the holiness. But first comes, like in the growth of every individual, the body develops, and then the spiritual content, the intellectual, the spiritual, the bar mitzvah. Only at 13 he does the mitzvot obligated. Up till then he's not a Jew, yes, but first develop the body properly, fully, and then the spiritual content can be revealed on a very strong foundation. That we talked about a lot, these stages of redemption. But I want to bring you another source today from the book Ein B'Milim Smecha. This time it's in English. From this book, Rav Teichtal, as we've seen before, that giant rabbi in Hungary, Czechoslovakia.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Okay.
Is there any Shekhinah in Kuslaris? Is Shekhinah shining?
That's the next topic. No, we have two more topics. But anyway, Ein Shekhinah Shora b'Chutzlaretz. The Shekhinah is not revealed in Chutzlaretz. We're talking about when we get to prophecy. Okay. There's two levels of Shekhinah. There's what's called the Shekhinah in exile, Shekhinah Begalu. There's in prayer at the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch. There's midnight prayers to pray the morn over the fact that the Shekhinah is dragged into exile with us. The Gemara in Megillah, page 29, says when the Jews go into exile, God is exiled with us. The Shekhinah, not God. God's presence, and also when we come back to Israel, then God's presence returns. So there's one level of Shekhinah in exile. That's a catastrophe. That this light, this goodness is now dragged. The rabbis say there it's just like a protective measure to keep the Jews alive, and that goes with us. But the revealed Shekhinah, in other words, prophecy, the full-blown Shekhinah, that's only in Eretz Yisrael. But that we'll see the sources for that.
It says that the Shekhinah went into Galut. Since we came back to Israel, is the Shekhinah no longer in Galut?
We'll talk about that. But yes, there's that protective measure, which was that the Shekhinah goes into exile with you. God sends us like this protection to be with us even in exile, to keep us alive and physically and spiritually. Now that we're coming back to Israel, what your question is, so what's left of there? So the rabbis talk about that indeed the Shekhinah is less there and the Jews have less protection. And that's why indeed, as we've seen, this mass assimilation. Jews are intermarrying, like they don't have that natural inner, not the intermarried, not religious Jews, but they stayed within the fold, so to speak. Here, that protective measure, that inner instinctive Shekhinah that was with us, indeed, the rabbis point out that maybe there's an indication of that leaving, and now it's back to Eretz Yisrael. And also the physical, but that we always suffered. But now the physical, we went to the Holocaust, etc. That the Shekhinah is now here, and there's less protection, physical and spiritually. But here I wanted to ask you the simple question of what is, you could say, the significance of a secular state. He is writing this, Rav Teichtal. He was murdered in 1945 in January, hiding out in Budapest. He's writing this in the middle of the Shoah, the Holocaust. He says, without books, I'm running away. I'm hiding in this like an attic without books, which is amazing that he writes the whole thing, all these sources. It's by heart. And he himself, as we mentioned, he was an anti-Zionist, and he, as we see also on the sheet, you can read it later, on the bottom right, the confession by the author, I was also against this project of rebuilding the land and despicable. I was told, that's how I was taught, that Zionism is evil, is rotten, is idolatry. Stay away from Zionism, don't go to Israel, whatever. And then he writes the whole book saying, hey, I was wrong, and I see how now what God is doing in bringing the Jews back to Israel. And because of that sin of not wanting to come to Israel, all these afflictions are coming up to wake us to come back, to return to the land. But then he brings what he calls here a proof of the positivity, of the value of the return of Jews back to the land of Israel, and he's aware of what kind of Jews they are. In other words, not always meticulous to the tiniest point of halacha, these Jews that are returning. So there's other sources, maybe we'll get to it. There's another book called A Question of Redemption.
It doesn't make sense to me. It's like when Rob Techtel is talking about like we have a lot of things before and now it doesn't have anything. He thought about going to the Eretz Israel.
Well, the Jews were coming back already, the Zionism, so to speak, the movement of Jews coming back were 100 years already before that.
Yeah, but the people thought that he become like out of the thinking, like he become crazy and
I don't know. But
it doesn't make any sense. Like he's a lot of like knowledge in Torah, and
he was a giant rabbi. He has
Yeah, yeah.
response to literature, commentary on the Torah. He was accepted. He was known. You're saying afterwards, how was he accepted when he came a Zionist, so to speak?
No, I mean the
He wasn't.
people, his followers, thought that he is gone crazy because
I don't know. They know who said. I mean, I don't know. They in New York, they banned the book, or they hid the book. They burnt the book. I don't know. They couldn't be found for a while. They reprinted it now. But in New York, in certain places of Hasidut that were still anti-Zionists, couldn't accept the fact that what he wrote, and
so they didn't read this.
they rejected. Yeah,
It's a
definitely.
very beautiful book. I read like.
Okay, and he himself says it. I was one of those that was anti, but now I realize that this is indeed what we talked about, seeing the hand of God and objectively. And now he brings this proof that he says. Although he, as you see, the son here says he didn't become a Zionist. He's just pro the returning of the Jews back to the land of Israel, but not that he's a Zionist. No, he wants to make a distinction. Anyway, you can read the introduction here.
Yeah.
But you'll see what he writes here, in praise of the Zionist pioneers. Again, there's other sources, maybe we'll get to. We'll start with this if we have a few minutes. After all I have said above, I will direct my words to those who are building our holy land in this generation. Like the builders, the pioneers. May God give them life, in other words, and he blesses them. May they prosper their ways. It is clear as day that your actions and deeds are desirable for God. Building the land of Israel. Wait a minute, what kind of Jews are you talking about? And he's aware, as we'll see later, he's aware of the Jews. What kind of Jews? These other sources. But he says, you have built cities, and from rocky fields you have made flourishing gardens. All of this is the result of great effort and sacrifice, right? Actual sacrifice, transforming epidemic disease-ridden swamps into flourishing soil. The fact that your actions are acceptable to God, I have demonstrated within this work many proofs. But now I'll bring you one proof that he says is irrefutable. So again, I don't think that, I'm not in the thing of bringing proofs. We try to learn Torah to understand the ways of God, how it works in history. Not trying to bring proofs of God. You can prove this proof, but nevertheless, this is what he brings down there. But the truth is, we're trying to build a vision that you see the hand of God, you understand what he's doing, in spite of you might have not be the way that you've expected. The Torah teaches us how to see beyond the surface, how to see beyond the behavioral level. Like I said, a Jew doesn't have a neshama if he says he doesn't have a Jew or doesn't live up to it. The neshama is there. That's a divinely. Otherwise, it's a man-made religion, a man-made good, limited to the limits of man's understanding. You believe in Judaism, it's good, you're doing the actions, you understand it. But it's not a man-made thing. The neshama that we have is not from this world. We mentioned it comes from beyond this world into this world to raise this world beyond this world. The whole value of Torah is that it's not man-made, it's a God-given thing, it's an objective truth. And we have that objective truth planted in us from Sinai, whatever, this implanting of that neshama is in the Jewish people. Believe it or not, want it or not, it's ironic and it's bad and it's sad and it's not good if you don't live up to who you really are, but who you really are remains. And God forbid if a person thinks he's the dog and barks and walks. He's not living, he doesn't change his reality. He's a human being, but he's not living up to it, doesn't express it. It's the same, and it'll come against him. He's living in self-contradiction. So the Jewish people have that neshama. That's not if they agree, you get it. If not, not. That we mentioned the Maharal in chapter 11 in Netzach Yisrael distinguishes between Noach and Abraham. Noach is a man-made thing. You get closer to God, God comes closer to you. Give, according to what you do, you get. If you disclose, if you leave the ladder, you get off the ladder. But Am Yisrael cannot leave the ladder. The connection to God is implanted in us. That's the DNA. That's the reality, the inner essence of the Jewish people. As he describes there, what he calls the Kedushat HaKlal, the holiness of the nation. There's a holy neshama, there's the soul of the Jewish people that is implanted in all the Jews, are branches of that divine, infinite, literally infinite, beautiful content, a blessing for all of creation. Lucky is that the Or HaChaim HaKadosh writes, Lucky is the world that has this nation in its midst. Ashrei olam she'umazru b'tocho. That the world has some nucleus, some, I don't know, holding point that through which it can rise up to beyond the limits of this world, beyond the problems and the, not just the negative, but to even a higher positive, a bigger world of beauty, of life, of divine content, of blessing that is beyond our contemplation for the moment. That's what's awaiting us. And that's what God lowered down to this world to raise this world, like a, how do you say, an anchor, so to speak. God lowered into the world to pick up the world through that. Is Archimedes' point, right? That to pick up the world to a higher level. That's our neshama. The Jews aren't always living up to that and expressing that. Nachon, that's a tragedy for us and for the world. But it can't last because nature demands its expression. The inner nature demands to be fulfilled. It will not let you stay away from, you can't, in self-denial, individual maybe can, but the nation will return to who it is, like the Rambam writes. Ultimately, the Jews will come back to the Torah, because that's their nature. It's not something if you want, you can get it. Maybe the Jews will never choose, but I don't want to like that religion, that philosophy. Maybe we like, I don't know, other ideas. But no, they will. It's a guarantee because it's already there. It's just a matter of coming back to who you are. And nevertheless, so we're trying to learn that, understand that inner objective reality. But here he brings what he calls a proof, like for those who want proofs, who need more of the external, like to show that it's really sources. So the Talmud tells us in Sanhedrin 102, Rabbi Yochanan says, why did Omri merit becoming king? Because he added a city to the land of Israel. Omri, the chart of the kings, one of the kings of Israel, but when they were the kings of Yehuda, as you know, and the kings of Israel. Yehuda were more the, I don't know, usually more the righteous and going away of Torah, not always. The kings of Israel went off, right? Yeravam ben Nevat started the separating the kingdom from Shlomo, after Shlomo, into what you could call a more, not the secular kingdom, but the problematic, as we'll see. Omri, we're discussing now, was, here it says he's born in the year 3021, at the time of the prophets of Ovadja and Eliyahu. He said he built the city. That's why he merited the kingdom. The Midrash, and I think Yalkut Shimoni adds, Tana of Eliyahu, in the name of Eliyahu the prophet. Once I was sitting in the house of study. We have a Midrash called Tana of Eliyahu. Once I was sitting in the house of study, in the Beit Midrash, in the yeshiva, I asked the students, my masters, why was Omri different than all the other kings of Israel, right, that other kingdom, whose children were not given the throne? Usually the one guy died, the next another overthrown, another dynasty, so to speak. But Omri merited, as we'll see, Omri came and 3 kings descending from him were given the throne. Omri, Achav, Achiziah, Yoram, 3 generations. Actually 3 of his children. You think. How did he merit it? That doesn't come by chance. They said, we have not learned to reply. How can it be? Because we'll see that Omri was not, in other words, we call a spade a spade. He was not a religious king, as we'll see. So they had no answer. But he has no merit. It doesn't seem on the surface, there's no seeming redeeming qualities that he deserves such a merit. So I said to them, it was because he added a great city to the land of Israel. He built a city in Eretz Israel. What city? Omri thought, just as Jerusalem is the city of Judean kings, right, the kings of Yehuda, so too will Samaria, Shomron, will be the city of the kings of Israel. Now, with Jerusalem is the center of the Beit HaMikdash and the Holy Kingdom. I'll make a counterpart, on an opposing kingdom. I'll make a kingdom, a city, which will be for the idol worshipping section. In other words, a capital for, I don't want to say, anyway, another city that will be the antithesis of Yerushalayim. So now he goes on. He'll explain this. I found in the work of Otzrot Yosef by the great Yosef Engel, who quotes the great Kabbalists that write. He writes, we must understand why did he give Omri this particular reward. Let's say he deserves something for building that city. We can understand why. What's so great about building a city? If he built a city for idol worshipping and for negative and for not idyllic reasons, certainly, Why does he get any reward? But let's say he gets a reward. But why specifically Malchut, the kingdom, that of having kingship remain in his family for that particular deed, and not a different reward? The Kabbalists reply that the land of Israel is in the sphere of kingdom, right? This Kabbalistic answer that Eretz Yisrael is parallel to this kingdom, what's called Malchut, right? There's 10 sphirot, these 10 levels of emanation, of godliness comes to the world. And Eretz Yisrael is this parallel to this Malchut in the upperly heavenly spheres. And since he added an aspect of kingdom on earth, he added a certain aspect of Malchut. He built what I called before a receptacle of kingdom in this world by adding a city to Eretz Yisrael. He therefore merited the parallel reward of having the kingship perpetuated in his family. That's Rav Yosef Engel. So Rav Tachtel says, we see clearly then that Omri was awarded, although he was one of the wicked kings, as we are told in the book of Kings. And Omri did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, and dealt wickedly above all that were before him. For he walked in all the ways of Yeravam the ben Navat, and in his sins which he made Israel sin. He not only sinned, he made others sin, to provoke God, the Lord of Israel, with his vanities. That's the verse. He built a city, but yes, he was an evil king, the Torah testifies, wicked, and made Jews sin. And the city he established was not for the glory of God, but for his own honor, as I quote the above. Right, the Midrash says, just as Jerusalem was the seat of the Judean kings, so will Samaria, Shomron, be the seat of the kings of Israel. In other words, you, like I said, if you can think you're building the wall of China, you're building a secular kingdom, but you're building a vehicle that enables God's kingdom to come to the world, even not independent of your intentions. His intentions wasn't to build a city to bring down God's name to the world. The opposite. Leave that Yerushalayim. I'm building Shomron to be the capital of my kingdom. The intentions were negative. So we see, however, that although his city was built amidst such great sin, Omri nevertheless performed the positive commandment of settling the land of Israel, the Holy Land. The objective, again, you're building the land of Israel, you're building the land of God. You're building the Holy Land. But your intentions say otherwise. We mentioned that he also wrote, right? The pioneers are building Eretz Yisrael without that intention. But we said no, because it doesn't depend on your intentions. There's things that are objective. Like I said, a Jewish mother that doesn't want a Jewish child. Jews suffer in the world. There are problems, there's anti-Semitism. I want my Jew to be not Jewish and whatever. But when the baby's born, it's a Jewish soul there. It doesn't depend. It's a package deal. That baby has a Jewish neshama, has a soul from the divine and highest level of emanation of godliness. What the rabbis talk about, the soul of the nation, of the land of the people of Israel. So too, building the land of Israel is not dependent on, as it says here. He brings this proof. But not only that, he says he performed, there's different opinions about it, but he says it performed the commandment of settling the land of Israel. He wasn't doing it for the sake of the mitzvah. As we'll see, that's what about the other source here, the Ramban, that we'll see maybe next time. The Ramban talks about the fulfillment, the commandment to live in Eretz Yisrael. And the commandment is to have Jewish sovereignty, to be not just to live here, but to have it, it says, he defines it, maybe I should have read it before, but to be in our hands and not in the hands of other nations. What does it mean to have the land in our hands and not in the hands of other nations?
Sovereignty.
Jewish sovereignty, in simple English. In their hands, the country's in our hands. Jews are living here, but it's not in your hands. What does it mean in your hands and not in the hands of others? That's how the Ramban defines the mitzvah. Is not just enough to make aliyah, but the full mitzvah, it's also mitzvah, that's part of the mitzvah. But the full mitzvah, he says, is twofold. To have Jewish sovereignty and to develop the land, to build it up. In other words, not just to live here and put a flag and say, okay, my army is, now I can go live in Holland and whatever, Florida. No, to develop the land, to bring out the fruit of the land of Israel, to develop the land. Right, there he talks about in his words, not to leave it desolate. No, it's to bring, to develop. We mentioned that the Khatam Sofer writes, to bring out the holy fruit. Agricultural development, usually, but also cities and also building it up. What Omri did here, he built a city. His intention was far from holiness. But he built, like I said, when you give that child, when you build Eretz Yisrael, you're building that receptacle of what? Of God's kingdom. That was our topic, right? That's the vehicle of God's kingdom in this world. But he goes on. For had he not performed the commandment of kingdom, he would not have been rewarded. And also, since the reward was kingdom, it is clear that, first of all, he wouldn't be rewarded. In other words, if it wasn't a mitzvah, he wouldn't be rewarded. And the opposite, and more for it. And more, so, since the reward was kingdom, was Malchut, it is clear that he enhanced the upper heavenly sphere of kingdom, of Malchut. And he was therefore deserving of kingship as a reward, in such great measure that he held it for 3 generations. So we see then that he performed the commandment with all of its ramifications, even as they concern the upper spiritual world, and he succeeded in reaching the highest level of performance by his activities below, although this was far from his intention. and he even acted sinfully. We see the high level of this achievement from his great reward, which is always parallel in keeping with the act, right? Midah keneged midah, you get paid what you get. We have here a clear and irrefutable proof that even the greatest sinner, one who denies the entire Torah, heaven forbid, like Omri, who is an idol worshiper, which is like having denied the entire Torah, the rabbis say. Yet by establishing and adding a city in the land of Israel, he built a city, secular, not only secular, he added a city to Eretz Yisrael. He had succeeded in achieving the highest spiritual levels of rectification, which this commandment can affect in the upper spiritual worlds. This has a clear application to our own times. Right? It's in English. The top of the second column. When many of those who are building the land in our many, unfortunately, have left the path of Torah, he was aware of who was building the land of Israel today. Not only, but amongst them. They are certainly no worse than Omri, about whom we were told he was worse in God's eyes than any who preceded him, and followed the path of Yerovam, the son of Nah, who caused the people of Israel to sin. Yet his constructive efforts on behalf of the land of Israel were considered to fulfill, right, the required spiritual perfection, and the unity of God was enhanced above by what I said before, that the kingdom of God is revealed through this kingdom of Israel. Objectively, two pieces of metal conduct, even if it's a rusty piece of metal, whatever. That's what conducts. That's how God created it, not because of Omri, in spite of him. In the same manner, it seems, look what he writes here, it seems quite clear that the sphere of kingdom, the Malchut in the upper spiritual worlds, is being rectified and glorified by the deeds of those who are building the land in our times, regardless of what they are. Even if they're the greatest sinners, yet their deeds are desirable before the creator of the universe. He says the necessary rectifications, right, Yehudim and Kabbalistic, and what the influence of the mitzvot are being performed by them by building the land of Israel. And what's the last paragraph underlined here. Moreover, I believe that the simple individual, look at he writes here, who builds the land without any higher spiritual motive, no intention, no kavanah, only for his own benefit. He's coming to Israel, building the land, having his own good day, building a house, building whatever, adding something here. He accomplishes a greater rectification, a tikkun, in the upper spiritual worlds than does a chassid, right? The greatest tzaddik in Hebrew. The greatest tzaddik, even the most pious chassid, with his tear-filled midnight prayers over the Shekhinah's exile. It's a strong statement. Not everybody agrees with that, but what he writes here, that the simple Jew who builds here something in Eretz Yisrael, the actual building, does more than the spiritual pious with the proper intentions of praying in the exile for midnight prayers over the Shekhinah's exile, we mentioned before. How can that be? Because he says the actual building. Like I said, it's someone who builds the woman who, let's say someone prays to have a Jewish child, prays and prays and prays, but is not married, let's say. Another woman who gives birth and says, I don't want a Jewish child, whatever, and she has the baby. She has more, she's bringing on that baby. That neshama is now in the world more than the guy who's praying, whatever, but not doing anything in actuality. He says the latter, the prayer, the tear-filled midnight prayers, certainly accomplishes a greater rectification by what he does. Yet it cannot compare to the rectification effected by the simple individual by his physical labor, what is physically building, the actual building, and by building something without having any higher, even though he has no higher thought. This is also stated in the Reshit Chochmah, a book of Kabbalistic Musar, that the major rectification is effected by the one who carries out the precept in actuality. Thinking about it, talking about it, praying for something, but the one who actually does it. Like I said, I don't know, it's a good example, but maybe the woman who gives birth, even without the proper intentions, as opposed to someone who's praying for a Jewish soul to be brought down to the world, etc., which is very important, but not getting married, doesn't have children, whatever, it's not in actuality, it's not the same level. The one who gives birth is in actuality. Now there's a new neshama in the world, in spite of, regardless of what they are, what they say, what their intentions. So too what we said before, the kingdom of Israel is... regardless of religious shortcomings. That's an objective reality, as we saw also in the, maybe we'll see the more sources for Rav Yaakov Emden that writes about the kingdom, the kibbutz by Yerovam ben Yoash, another Yerovam ben Yoav, who conquered Eretz Yisrael, and that's considered has a value as a kingdom. So the Jewish kingdom, and again, we have to understand more and more the receptacle, the vehicle of godliness into this world. There's two levels. There's the inner absolute, what I call the objective level, what the Maral calls the holiness of the nation, the collective holiness, that's planted already in the world, in our souls. in our reality. Then there's the subjective, how much we live up to it, how much we express it. Of course, the ideal is that we express and bring to fruition and live according to our inner neshama, not to leave it inside and it's a holy soul. Oh, that's it, I have a holy soul. That's true. But if you understand that, and you understand the beauty of the graduate, what you can bring, what blessing. It's like someone who's talented, he takes an aptitude test. You're the greatest, I don't know, musician in the world. I'm the greatest musician. I have the greatest aptitude. I don't have to do anything. I write music. I have the great aptitude, potential for being the greatest musician. Yes, but if you understand it, you'd want to live up to and bring that blessing that God gave you, that gift He gave you, to bring it to fruition, to express it. The Jewish neshama is there no matter what. The Rabbi say, "Lo nifgemet l'olam," is never contaminated. Nefesh HaChaim elaborates. There's levels of the soul. Certain levels we can contaminate, but the neshama, the spiritual, the inner essence, that is unreachable, contaminated. But that's not to stay there. If that's a reason to leave it that way and say it, therefore not to use it. The opposite. Therefore, it's even more obligation and a privilege to live up to it. First of all, to be yourself. It's not something. It's advisory, whatever. It's to live up to your true potential, to be who you're really alive. Not like it's leaving yourself and have to be religious. It's to live up to who you really are. True life, full life, your super life. And what blessing you have to bring to the world, this energy. You open up the valve and let godliness, literally this infinite light, come to the world. Who wouldn't want to do that? It's not like it said it brings you to, it can be misunderstood. I think, okay, I have a neshama. It cannot be contaminated. It doesn't leave me no matter what. So I don't have to do anything. I can be, God forbid, no. That's absurd. In other words, it's going against yourself, first of all. It's not some religious edict that you're not living up to God's laws. These are the laws of your nature, your inner essence. The Torah tells you how to fully live your life and bring that blessing to you, to the world, and your creation, to bring the world to its ultimate perfection. B'ezrat Hashem, we should participate in that. And another source I want to bring you next time, B'ezrat Hashem, a very strong source of the rabbis. We'll leave it for next time, B'ezrat Hashem. To bring back the sheets, or give me back the sheets, because we'll do it again. We didn't finish it yet.